My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sivasankaran, Guru Piranyo, fellow Jnanis. Today I'm going to continue the message of the Katha Upanisha. We're getting into some really very interesting dialogue between Nachiketa and Lord Yama. So in the previous satsang, I spoke about the qualities of a competent teacher to teach this knowledge of self-realization or God realization. And Lord Yama outlines what the teacher ought to be, the qualities of the teacher. And very similar you see in other scriptures like Adi Shankara in his Viveka Chudamani also outlines the quality of a teacher. So here again Lord Yama then has tremendous amount of praise for Nachiketa. Oh, you possess this quality, and that's why, even though I threw a lot of alluring things to you, you did not fall for it, and you have that quality, including when I taught you the knowledge of how to get to Brahmaloka. You practiced it very well, and you outlived it. And so you had a lot of praise for Nachiketa. So in this, Nachiketa was so humble and so you can see the qualities of the mind. So so here Nachiketa then says in paragraph 14, it is not necessary to praise me, right? It says, so it's okay, you don't have to praise me a lot. And you see, ordinary human beings love a lot of praise, but here he says, no, it's okay, and he says that if you are really pleased with me, and if you think I am fit to learn this, right, then please explain whatever you can about that which is beyond what the scriptures tell us to do and not to do. That which is neither a cause nor an effect, and that which is beyond past, present, and the future. So, most human beings get caught up by, wanting to be praised, wanting to be recognized. And, we also see that in many of the, organizations, when somebody does something, they want lots of praise and so on. So here, Nachiketa was not like that. So he says, it's okay, if you think I'm worthy of this knowledge, because what Lord Yama tells him is that for people to be worthy of this knowledge, they must not have the ego, they must not have the characteristics that clouds the mind. In Bhagavad Gita, it says that karpanya dosha, which is the shrunken mind, and the ego comes into play. He says, you possess this, and and that's why you are the most qualified person. And Nachiketa is so humble. He says, it's okay, no need to praise me. If you think I'm qualified, please teach me and tell me about that which is transcendental to everything and universal. So what Nachiketa was asking is actually about the self that is talked about in many, many scriptures, right? So here he says, and it's so difficult to define that self. For an ordinary human being, they cannot grasp this concept, right? It is there, but yet it is not there, right? So it is in the world, but we don't see it. It's in all, it animates the tangible world, but it seems to be intangible. So there is no clear rules and regulation, because in all the things in the material world, everything is governed by some kind of principle or some kind of idea. But here, this is something that there is no rules that govern this. So he says, can you explain this to me? He says that which is transcendental to matter, space, time, right? And so this is what he said. He's not asking for anything, He doesn't want any praise. He just wants this knowledge. So Lord Yama then says, okay, this boy is truly amazing, right? So let me impart this knowledge, right? He says that is the goal which all the Upanishads and all the scriptures talk about. They praise the highest of this state of existence, right? He says that which only austerities reveal. That means only when we get rid of all our desires and all our wants and all those things, he say only then one gets it, right? Which is only the ones that have prepared and practiced, restrain, controlling the senses. He says, only those who practice this that helps silence the mind, quietens the mind, instilling that quietude in the mind, only they will get this knowledge. So he says this knowledge of quietening the mind is spoken, this austerity. Austerity means the absence of material thoughts and desires, right? So he says that whenever we have thoughts or desires, our mind gets distracted. He says the only way to discover this self is through slowly quietening the mind. And he says that how do you do it? Remember, Nachiketa asked, everybody spoke about this. How do you describe this and how do I acquire this knowledge? Right? So he says that I will briefly tell you what it is, right? How to practice this. He says that it is actually this divine vibration that is resonating throughout the universe, our universe that we know, because everything emanates, everything emerges from the universe. That same resonance is within all of us. So here he explains this, right? So this is actually the divine vibration. He talks about Om, right? He says this Om is also referred to as the Sapta Brahman. That means that Brahman that manifests as the vibration. Is the most sacred word in the scriptures. He says, and it's the sacred, is the most sacred because it is the closest to the Brahman. It's not the Brahman yet, it is the closest to the Brahman. Right? So he explains this. So what is this Om that he's talking about? And those who practice this Kundalini will know what I'm talking about in the next few passages. So he says this Om is something that is amazing, which actually it has that grossness, but it also has that subtleness. It has that causality, but it also has that transcendentality, right? So he says, and he says that Om in each word means something really, really profound, and I'll explain what that each of that word. Often we say Om, O-M, but actually it's A-U-M, right? And that's what Om is the divine vibration that all of us have. So here he explains what that Om is. For me, the Om is actually the awareness of the divine vibration in all of us. The divine vibration is resonating the Brahman or that divinity which is formless, manifests as our universe, and our universe emanates in vibrations, and that. So what we become aware is actually that that Brahman or the divinity or God emanates in this material world as the resonation or the rhythm or the Bhagavan. So here, this is what we call the cosmic vibration, which gives us awareness and consciousness. It also has got the universality. That means it manifests as everything in this universe. The universe itself is that. You can say that this formed universe is a packaged version of the formless, right? So here he explains that this awareness of this universality, that vibration that is resonating throughout us, is what gives us that enlightened life, enlightened experience, that moksha, right? So this, he says that this mind must retreat from the external vibrations and the noise to anchor on the divine vibration that is imprinted in our DNA. So he's explaining this method too. So, which means that part of realizing that cosmic vibration means that we have to shift from that outward to the inward, allocating some time for our introspection, contemplation, reflection, and the meditational sadhana, right? So here he explains how to experience that self, right? So here, for me, this is an amazing discovery of awareness. So Swamiji always say, "Unarva Gavadipa" is asking us to be aware of that universal vibration that leads to moksha, right? So whenever people ask him, say, "Unarva Gavadipa," ella nalla sari vandirum. So that cosmic divine vibration is resonating in everything in this universe, in every minute particles, molecules, atoms, right up to our own body. So here he explains this. So he says, Nachiketa, you are desireless. So it's easy for you to acquire this knowledge. And that is why boon too, you're able to practice this so intensively because your mind was so innocent, right? And that is why you even surpass most of the deities to attain that divine cosmic vibration. And that is clearly seen in your mind. You don't want praises, you don't want anything material, but you are asking about that which is non-material and divine. So Lord Yama was explaining that you are already there, but I want you to know that the only way to acquire that is through this awareness, universality, and moksha, the divine cosmic vibration. Right? So again, see, that is what that moksha would lead us to the Turiya, and I'll define what that is. So what we see is that he says that this Om, the cosmic vibration, is actually represents the Brahman, the ultimate reality, because it neutralizes all that material thoughts. And when the material thoughts become absent, the true reality is realized. So this is why I always emphasize that every meditation, allocate time for meditation, introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation. So then he goes on to explain, how praising the Om and its worship. So he explains now what that is. He says that this Om is Brahman with attributes. So he's going to now talk about the Brahman with attributes and the Brahman without attributes. For me, here he's trying to define what is the small I and the big I. Right? Small I has all the attributes, and the big I has without attributes, right? And he goes on to explain this. The small I consists of, our sharira, our material body, our causal body, and our subtle body. So gross, subtle, and causal. It's also part of the Brahman, right? So how do we make the difference between the Brahman? Here it is. So he's explaining the Brahman has attributes and without attributes. What do we mean by attributes? It's called the Saguna Brahman. That means the Brahman, ultimate reality, with qualities or attributes. What it describes is that it describes the divine as having form, personality, and characteristics, right? So he says that the Brahman has this attributes that reflect this material nature that we live in, you know. So he says it has characteristics of compassion, omniscient, power, creator, sustainer, and a destroyer. So you see that the Trinity within the scriptures is explained in the context of Brahman with attributes, God with all this material and attributes, because everything in this universe manifests from that Brahman, right? Without the attributes. So we see that manifestation of the Saguna Brahman, or the Brahman with attributes, all of us have, right? So we have, all the qualities of our own, we have personality, ego, compassion, a whole host of these qualities, what I call the 18 divine qualities. We also have that 18 asuric qualities, right? So again, he says that this Brahman, has this Om reveals to us that Brahman with attributes, the Brahman without attributes. It reveals to us in Mahan's language the small I and the big I. So again, uh, a very fascinating way of describing it. But also he says that there is the Brahman also has the Om also is, this Om is Brahman with attributes and without attributes. What does that mean? It is that which is formless, dimensionless, timeless, right? It is also beyond our human description. We cannot explain that with our human faculties, right? And it's also part of that pure existence consciousness, this notion of Sachidanandam, the Sat Chit Ananda Nila. So he says both this Brahman with and without attributes are packaged in us, right? So he says now, and later on he says that how the 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 experience of this Brahman in this duality, if one understands this, you see that you're not affected by this material world. So here he talks about the Parabrahman, which is Brahman without attributes, and he says that Apara Brahman is actually the Brahman with attributes. So sometimes the Om is also referred to as Para and Apara. So it is manifest from the formless, but gives rise to form because of the nature of our universe. Right. So again, he describes these qualities of both the. And if you see very carefully, we actually possess those qualities. We see that we have this humanly attributes of compassion, omniscience. Sometimes feel power. Feel, we can create things. So we have those attributes besides all the other, humanly attributes and personality. He says that too is Brahman, but in a different form, right? And here it is, we also have a Brahman without attributes. We experience this formless in our deep sleep, in our deep meditation, and in our death, right? And then the body is passed on. It is beyond human description, because how do I explain that feeling of that formless, timeless experience of being oneness in that deep sleep? There's no way I can describe except some, an approximate word in English or Tamil that tries to explain that, but it's still not that. And also this pure existence of that consciousness, in the deep blissful state, you feel one with everything in this universe. So this is what he's explaining now, because Yama asked him, what is this self? How do I experience this? Right? And he's giving this, he says, Lord Yama would not have taught him if not for the qualities of this mind. He says, I don't want to waste my time with somebody who's got no time to devote for, this spiritual pursuit, right? So Lord Yama takes, say, but I'm so happy that you are here because you do not miss it. You continuously, relentlessly not being distracted by this material world, but pursuing this knowledge with great intensity. So here he's. So again, he throws the praise to Lord, to Nachiketa, right? Then he goes on to explain how do we attain this Brahman. I talked about both the Apara and the Para Brahman. So he says, yes, the best way to attain Brahman, Om is the best way. Om is actually the meditational practice to anchor the mind on that inner vibration, that life force, that vibration of that life force. You can call it by different names. You see that Yogananda calls it the Kriya Yoga. Others call it Kundalini Yoga. Whatever it is that vibration, that the Om is what manifests or describing that life force that manifests in us. So he says the best way to do is go back to the Om state, that meditative state that gives us that experience of quietude. In that quietude, we discover both the Brahman without attributes, what we call the Para Brahman. And when we come back to this material world, we experience the Brahman with attributes, the qualities of the Brahman of compassion, empathy, all those things. He says that the first practice, the first one, which is the Apara Brahman, leads you to Brahmaloka. Brahmaloka is actually about, he says, that you enjoy the status of Brahma, a divine state. He says a state that you can create many things in this material world. Brahma is the creator. I want to explain this. You see, what it says is that if you know that Brahman is core to your DNA, as I always say, Brahman or the Guru or the divinity is the charioteer of my chariot, right? So you see that it leads you to Brahmaloka, the state of pure joy, happiness, and creativity in this material world. So he says that, it is not running away, it is actually about discovering the Brahman with all its attributes that is related to this material universe, right? So he explains this very beautifully here. The Brahmaloka. Brahmaloka is you can say heaven, or where you have no trouble, you have no torment, no demons, you feel so pristine and enlightened, right? He says that the second Brahman, the second one leads you to the union with the Brahman, one with the Brahman. The other one leads you to the Brahmaloka, that means great creativity, innovation, discovery, everything that is related to the goodness of our own material identity, our own material existence. But he says that the second one, which is the the second status, which is actually the Brahman without attributes, is what leads you to that union of that Brahman, the Om. So the Om has two impact. One is gives you a peaceful life, creative life, innovative life, and so on. But the second one is it gives you inherit the personality of the Brahman itself. One is the Brahma, which is the creator of the material universe, the creation, everything about creation and innovation. You also acquire that qualities of that Brahman that is universal. He says that is what that Om delivers for us. Right? So you see those who are practicing meditation properly, you see that they have a very successful life, but yet they are grounded. Like Nachiketa, it's okay. I just do my duty. I don't expect this and that praise and this and so on. He says that this is what he explains that, you have while living, you experience that Brahman with attributes, and while in the deep sleep and the deep meditation state, you experience the Brahman without that attributes. Right? So what it tells you is that this practice of Om, Om leads you to, for me, this Om resonates as the Kundalini practice that is taught to me by my Guru. It helped quieten the mind, and you can feel the resonation. The same thing if you read Yogananda's book, he'll talk about Kriya Yoga. So, and many, many other different meditational practice. So what is the benefit? So here he's explaining for me, this 17 is explaining that, when you practice this meditational practice and you discover the Brahman with attributes, your body becomes strong, it becomes powerful, all the positive things that happens to you, flexibility, great posture, good health, good food digestion, balance of hormones, erases those material, that muscle tension. So the Brahman manifests as attributes that reflects the quality of the benefits to the physical form. The same thing you see that when the body is healthy and the brain is healthy, right? Your mental state becomes really good. Stress is reduced, everything, you have good sleep, good mood, good emotional resilience. It is also that Brahman with that attributes, not perturbed by anything. Right? So the first two is actually the Brahman with attributes. But you see that as you go further, you get that spiritual benefits, which is you become greater, self-awareness increases, a sense of purpose, not just material purpose, a sense of being one with the Brahman itself. You, improve your intuition, you become more compassionate and passionate, and it reduces your count. All these are Brahman with attributes, right? So you experience this quality because of that manifestation of the Brahman, that small I that Mahan spoke about, right? So what we see here is that if your body is fit, your mental state is fit, your spiritual connection is there, these attributes, Brahman with attributes, and if you practice your meditation properly, that mind is relieved, your brain health improves, your hormone levels harmonize, your thought processes become more and more quiet, you attain a sense of quietude that the material world completely is dissolved into that spiritual realm, right? And when everything is absolutely quiet, you discover when that small I is absolutely quiet, it reveals that the small I is nothing but the big I, that Brahman. So when the attributes disappear, when the attributes go to sleep, all that is left is that Brahman, right? So here the apara becomes the para. So here it is that his Lord Yama is explaining to Nachiketa how one can moderate and modulate the mind to help the mind quieten down. In that quietude, the discovery of the Brahman takes place. The discovery of the self takes place. So, and ultimately, you see that you lead a dharmic life and you lead an enlightened life. Though the body is mortal, you realize that the mortal body is animated by an mortal body is, animated by an immortal self. Right? So again, we see that we have that dual component as what Mahan talked about. I'm going to stop here because Lord Yama is already giving him what remains and what does not remain. As a matter of fact, later on, he defines what the self is and how the self is transcendental to Sukha Dukkha, birth and death. So he's explaining, but to get to that, one needs to ensure the mind reverberates in this cosmic vibration. Not easy for many people because they're so distracted with the material world. But here it is. He is taught by Lord Yama on how to use this Om, the divine vibration, to know both the Brahman with and without attributes. Right? The one without attributes, you are always the peaceful, fantastic feeling experience. When you come out of that experience, resonates and percolates the mind and all its attributes, and it becomes a Brahman with attributes. That means all the good qualities, the universal qualities, while living in this material world. Right? So what this method is teaching is awareness of that attributes that come from Brahman, all the qualities, and the attributes without, so the Brahman without that attributes. In the deep meditational state, one experiences this. So he says that, so he's now walking through within step by step how introspection, contemplation, reflection, meditation is the path to take you to that ultimate pinnacle of that self. I will continue next week on passage 18 onwards about his defining that self, that Brahman with attributes and without attributes in the context of itself. And you will know in the next class that the self, what is it? All of us have, we say myself. But what is the self? Right? And that you'll see that the self is amazingly minute, but yet it is also very big. Right? So again, we will just have a more intense discussion on that self, because ultimately Lord Yama wants to take Nachiketa to immerse in that self. In that immersion, he discovers the entire universe that is, unraveling from within himself. So he'll take Lord the Nachiketa through this journey, and as we go through this journey, I hope you too have the qualities of the Nachiketa and also attain that enlightened life. Sandosham.